When two police officers arrested her, they had no idea they'd be facing her again. This time, as the judge who would decide their fate. It was a bright afternoon in Austin, Texas. Zilker Park buzzed with activity. Kids laughing on the playground, runners pacing along the trails, and families lounging under the shade of sprawling oak trees. Amid the peaceful chaos, a Latina woman sat alone on a wooden bench near the pond, absorbed in the thick hardcover book resting on her lap. Her name was Isabella Rojas, a well-respected defense attorney, finally stealing a rare moment for herself away from her demanding schedule. She had just turned a page when the sudden screech of tires cut through the air. A police cruiser pulled up to the curb, drawing the attention of nearby park-goers. Two officers stepped out, their expressions rigid, radiating authority. Their eyes immediately landed on Isabella, the only person sitting alone in the vicinity. "Ma'am, may we have a word?" one officer called, his tone more accusatory than concerned. Isabella looked up, her expression calm. "Of course," she replied, closing her book carefully. The second officer stepped closer, his voice clipped. "We received a report of suspicious activity in the area. Mind telling us what you're doing here?" Isabella frowned, clearly puzzled. "Suspicious activity? I'm just sitting here reading." She held up the book as if to prove her point. But their scrutiny didn't waver. "Can we see some ID?" the first officer demanded. Her pulse quickened, but she remained composed. "I don't understand. What's the reason for this?" "It's routine," the second officer said, though his tone suggested otherwise. A small crowd began to gather, murmuring among themselves. Some watched with curiosity, others with unease. With a sigh, Isabella reached into her bag, pulling out her wallet. As she handed over her driver's license, one officer examined it with unnecessary intensity. "Isabella Rojas," he read aloud, almost mockingly. "What's your business here, Ms. Rojas?" She inhaled deeply, keeping her voice steady. "I live in this city. I came to enjoy the park. Is that a problem?" The officer's lips tightened. "We'll see." He returned her ID, but instead of leaving, the questioning continued, shifting from standard protocol to something more like an interrogation. "Do you always carry a book like that around?" one officer sneered. "Are you alone or waiting for someone?" The other added, his hand resting on his belt in a deliberate gesture. Isabella had handled countless tense courtroom battles, but this was different. The power dynamic was stark. She knew exactly what was happening. "I'm not answering any more questions unless you tell me what I'm being accused of," she said firmly. The first officer took a step closer. "Don't get smart with us," he snapped. "We're just doing our job." "And I know the law," Isabella countered. "I'm not breaking it by sitting in a public park." But reason wasn't on their agenda. The officer grabbed her arm. "You're resisting," he said, though Isabella hadn't moved. "What are you doing?" she exclaimed, startled. The crowd's murmurs grew louder. A man pulled out his phone, recording the scene. "Stop resisting," the officer repeated, his voice louder, more theatrical, as if performing for the audience. Isabella's heart pounded as the cold metal of handcuffs snapped around her wrists. She forced herself to stay calm, even as humiliation and frustration burned in her chest. The officers led her toward their cruiser, ignoring the growing outrage from bystanders. As she was pushed into the back seat, she locked eyes with a young woman filming the encounter. In that brief moment, there was an unspoken plea. Make sure people see this. But Isabella knew this wasn't the end of her story. It was only the beginning. The police station was suffocating. The fluorescent lights buzzed relentlessly as Isabella endured the humiliating booking process. She was fingerprinted, photographed, and led to a cold holding cell. "Enjoy your stay. One officer smirked as he locked the door. Isabella sat on the hard bench, replaying the absurdity of the afternoon over and over in her mind. How had a peaceful moment at the park spiraled into this? Hours passed before anyone acknowledged her. A young officer approached the cell, clipboard in hand. "Ms. Rojas, you've been charged with resisting arrest and obstructing a peace officer," he said flatly. "On what grounds?" she asked, sharper than she intended. "You can discuss that in court," he replied before walking away. She exhaled slowly, forcing herself to think strategically. The charges were flimsy, and she knew it. But the battle ahead wouldn't be easy. Cases like hers rarely were. When she was finally released on bail, her best friend Maya was waiting by the curb. "Isabella!" Maya rushed forward, eyes filled with concern. "Are you okay?" Isabella nodded, though she felt anything but okay. "I'm fine." The word felt hollow. As they drove away, Maya kept stealing glances at her, waiting for her to speak. Finally, Isabella broke the silence. "I'm not letting this slide." Maya tightened her grip on the wheel. "What are you thinking?" "I have the tools, the knowledge, and the resources to fight back," Isabella said. "And I will." That night, she sat at her kitchen table, legal pads spread before her, outlining a civil rights lawsuit against the officers and the department. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from unwavering determination. The following week saw a wave of public support. The video of her arrest, posted by the young woman in the park, went viral. Messages flooded in from people who had faced similar injustices. Isabella wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for everyone who had ever been silenced. But fate had one more twist in store. Her attorney called with unexpected news. The very officers she was suing were now defendants in an unrelated misconduct case. And Isabella had just been assigned as the judge. As she stepped into the courtroom that day, the weight of the moment was undeniable. Officer Carter and Officer Daniels sat at the defense table, their faces pale as she took her seat on the bench. For the first time, the power dynamic had shifted. But Isabella knew this wasn't about revenge. It was about justice. She took a breath and spoke the words that would set everything into motion. "This court is now in session. Please be seated." This story isn't just about Isabella. It's about the fight for accountability, the resilience of those who refuse to stay silent, and the unexpected ways justice can turn the tables. In a world where power can be misused, the real victory isn't just in winning a case. It's in standing up, speaking out, and making sure that no one else has to endure the same injustice. Because real change doesn't happen by chance. It happens when people refuse to accept anything less. Did you know? Just one like from you can give me the motivation to create more awesome videos. And by subscribing with the notification bell on, you'll never miss out on my next amazing content. Don't forget to leave a comment below. Let me know what you think about this video or suggest a topic you'd like to see next.